Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say I concur in remarks that you have made, and I'm going to make some similar remarks along those lines. I look forward to having a concrete discussion on the Biden administration's policy toward Russia. I hope to hear from you how the United States is planning to do more and faster to help defeat Russia in Ukraine and counter Russian aggression and malign influence around the world. Indeed, we aren't the only ones that are hungry for this. I think if you look around this room and see the attendance today and see the gaggle of media people out in the hall shouting questions at us, everyone is hungry for this discussion, and I hope we have a robust discussion on that today. It's been almost a year ago now that Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine turned the status quo of international relations on its head. In response to this bold escalation, the United States and our allies around the world quickly came to a consensus that we need to support Ukraine's defense of its people, territory, and way of life from Russian aggression. Whenever we have a discussion like this, it really ought to start with a short, very short, and brief discussion of how we got here. We all know that Ronald Reagan spent 8 years in his presidency as his top priority bringing down and breaking up the Soviet Union and pulling those satellite countries away from Russia. He was successful. He got that done. And we, as America, adopted that as our policy. We promoted it. We helped it in every way we can. One of the things that happened, of course, was all the countries that were in the orbit of the USSR pulled away and went on their own way. That breakup included 4 countries that had nuclear weapons at the time. One was Russia, of course, one was Kazakhstan, one was Belarus, and one was Ukraine. Obviously, it's also the policy of the United States to contain nuclear weapons and be against proliferation wherever possible. On December 5th of 1995, the United States sat down in Budapest, Hungary, with the Ukrainians, with the Brits at the table and with the Russians at the table, and entered into an agreement whereby they, that is all of us, asked the Ukrainians to give up their nuclear weapons, in return for which Ukraine would get security for their borders and against an invasion by any country. All 4 of us signed that. The Ukrainians did what they agreed to do. They gave up their nuclear weapons. And where do they find themselves in 2022? Facing an invasion by one of the countries that actually signed that agreement. We have not only a moral obligation, but a legal obligation to do what we said we'd do on December 5th of 1995, and we're doing that. Over the past year, extensive discussions have taken place about how the U.S. and our allies can support Ukraine. That is the conversation of about every conversation you enter into here in D.C. However, these discussions get bogged down by fears of giving Ukraine too much equipment too quickly for fear of upsetting Moscow. I'm tired of hearing that. Everyone talks about the need to hand Russia a strategic defeat in Ukraine, but the administration's policies stop short of fully supporting that goal. What is missing is a more robust discussion about U.S. policy toward Russia now and, just as importantly, beyond the current conflict. Any notion that we can interact with Russia like we did a year ago was shattered by the invasion, but also by Russia's noncompliance with the New START Treaty and many other malign actions it's taken around the world. It has not only soured its relationship with us, it has soured its relationship with virtually the rest of the planet, with the exception of a half a dozen of what I call no-good countries that are in league with them. I expect our witnesses to help us better understand the administration's plans to confront all of Russia's malign influence. It is critical that U.S. foreign policy be informed by a long-term vision for a future where Russia coexists with its neighbors and does not threaten to destabilize the international community. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has so far not made clear a concrete policy for how the United States will directly confront Russia as a strategic adversary. While Putin has irreversibly tied the fate of his regime to the outcome of the war in Ukraine, there is so much more to confronting Russia that the United States must consider. It is essential that the Biden administration's Russia policy be characterized by leadership and initiative. I hope your testimony and responses will be given with a focus on that overreaching Russia policy today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.